The moment you stopped chasing her, something started happening inside her mind. And you have no idea what it was. That is not a small thing to sit with. Because if the sequence I am about to describe is accurate, and I'm going to show you that it is, then the silence you have been treating as empty space was never empty at all. Something was moving through it. Something she was not fully in control of. And the reason you could not see it is the same reason most men in your position never see it. You were on the outside of an internal process that had nothing to do with what you could observe. The reason this stays invisible is straightforward. When you stop pursuing a woman, your instinct is to read her external behavior for signals. Is she reaching out? Is she distant? Does she seem affected? And when nothing obvious comes back, the natural conclusion is that nothing is happening. That the silence confirms what you feared. That she simply does not care. That the withdrawal changed nothing. That you miscalculated. What I want you to hold on to through everything in this video is one question. What is actually happening inside a woman's mind in the hours and days after a man she was used to pursuing her goes quiet? And why does that silence do something that all the chasing never could? By the end of this, you will have a complete answer. Most men assume that when they stop chasing, she feels relieved. Like pressure has lifted, like she can finally breathe. That assumption is almost always wrong, and it's costing you something significant. Here is what actually happens in the first hours after a man who has been consistently present, reaching out, initiating, showing up, suddenly goes quiet. Her nervous system notices before her conscious mind does. This is not a romantic idea. It is a documented feature of how human brains process social patterns. When a behavior that has become part of the background rhythm of your day abruptly stops, the brain registers the absence as a signal before it has identified what the signal means. Psychologists call this expectation violation, the mild but measurable internal disruption that occurs when a consistent pattern breaks without explanation. It is the same mechanism that makes you glance at your phone when a notification sound you were half expecting does not arrive. The absence of the expected thing becomes a presence of its own. So in the first hours, she is not feeling relieved. She is feeling something quieter and more disorienting than that. A faint gap where a pattern used to be. She may not name it as anything. She may not connect it to you consciously for some time. But the gap is there. Of course, this varies. If his pursuit was aggressive or unwanted, the absence does bring genuine relief, and the sequence I am describing does not follow. But for a woman who had at least some level of positive feeling toward him, even if she was not fully aware of its depth, the gap lands differently. It does not feel like nothing. It feels like something missing that she had not thought to value until it was gone. That initial disorientation, that gap where you used to be, does not stay still. It moves. And where it moves next is where this gets genuinely interesting. Here is something that almost never gets explained about female psychology. A woman cannot truly assess how she feels about a man while he is actively pursuing her. The pursuit itself gets in the way. This sounds counterintuitive, so let me explain exactly what I mean. When a man is consistently present, texting, initiating, making himself available, a woman's internal evaluation of him gets crowded out by her response to the attention itself. She is managing the dynamic, deciding how much to engage, calibrating how warm to be. The attention fills the space where her own feelings would otherwise have room to form and be examined clearly. When the pursuit stops, that space opens. And what she does with the space is almost always the same. She begins a quiet internal review. Not a deliberate one, not something she sits down to do, but an involuntary audit that surfaces in the gaps of her day, when she is driving somewhere familiar or trying to fall asleep, or in the middle of a conversation about something unrelated when a thought of him passes through without invitation. The specific question that emerges from this audit is some version of, why did he stop? Not asked with alarm necessarily, just asked. And the asking of it pulls her attention toward him in a way that his constant presence was not doing. Because a question demands an answer. And in searching for the answer, did I say something? Did he meet someone else? Was I reading this wrong? She is forced to examine exactly how much the question matters to her. That examination is the thing his pursuit was never producing. You might be thinking, but if she was interested, wouldn't she already know that? And sometimes, yes. But the level of certainty a woman has about her feelings toward a man why he is actively pursuing her is almost always shallower than what she discovers when she has to look for herself. And what she finds when she actually asks herself that question, honestly, without the pressure of his attention filling the space, often surprises her more than it surprises him. What she discovers when she finally sits with the question honestly depends almost entirely on something he did or didn't do long before he went quiet. Here is the dynamic that most explanations of this topic miss entirely. Her internal audit does not evaluate his withdrawal. It evaluates him, the whole picture of who he was during the time he was present. And that picture has a quality she responds to very specifically. If his pursuit carried a texture of constant availability, if he responded to every message within minutes, regardless of what he was doing, if his plans bent easily to accommodate hers, if his energy in their interactions seemed to rise and fall based entirely on how she was responding to him, then what she discovers in his absence is something quiet and slightly uncomfortable. She finds that what she adapted to was the attention, not the person, the feeling of being sought. And when that feeling is gone, she searches for the loss of him specifically and finds it harder to locate than she expected. This is what researchers who study attachment and social bonding describe as attention dependency, where the consistent presence of another person's focus becomes a comfort in itself, independent of genuine connection to who that person is. It is not a failing on her part. It is a normal human response to a particular pattern of behavior. But if his pursuit was different, if he was warm without being constant, if he had a life that was visibly his own, if there were times he was simply elsewhere and not adjusting his world around her reactions, then what she discovers in his absence is something else. She finds him, the specific person, the quality of his attention when it was present, which she now realizes was not guaranteed and therefore had value she had not fully accounted for. She finds more feeling than she expected to find. The silence does not create this difference. It reveals it. There is one specific quality that when present during the pursuit phase makes her absence response almost entirely predictable. And it has nothing to do with how often he reached out. There are men who stop chasing and the woman barely notices. And there are men who stop chasing and the woman cannot stop thinking about them. The difference between those two outcomes was established long before they went quiet. The quality that determines which category a man falls into is what psychologists call self-concept clarity, a stable, internally anchored sense of identity that does not visibly fluctuate in response to how another person is responding to you. In plain terms, he seemed complete whether she was warm toward him or not. His ease in himself did not depend on her making it available. This quality is not performed confidence. It is not the absence of feeling. A man can be genuinely interested in a woman, can want something to develop, and still carry this quality. as long as a sense of himself does not hinge on her approval of him. Women read this often without being able to name what they are reading. They feel it as a kind of atmosphere around a man, a groundedness, a sense that he has arrived at himself and is not waiting for her confirmation to stay there. When that quality is present during the pursuit phase, his withdrawal creates something specific in her. A question about the person, not just about the attention. Because the person was distinct, the person had weight. And now that weight is absent, and she can feel the specific shape of what is missing. When that quality is absent, when his pursuit had the texture of someone whose value was waiting to be confirmed by her response, his withdrawal produces something flatter, a mild relief possibly, a vague awareness that something is different, but not the kind of internal pull that leads anywhere significant. You cannot manufacture this quality retroactively, but understanding it changes how you carry yourself from this moment forward in every interaction with every woman long before any question of withdrawal arises. Because what she feels in the quiet is one thing, what she does with it is something else entirely, and this is the part most men never get to see. I want to stop here for a moment, because what I just described is only useful to you if you can actually let it run. And most men can't. Not because they don't want to, because they don't know what the silence looks like from her side. Here is the pattern I see play out consistently. A man withdraws, he gives it a few days, he feels the anxiety of not knowing what is happening on her end, because from where he stands, the silence looks the same whether she's thinking about him constantly or not thinking about him at all. And so he interprets the absence of visible signal as evidence that nothing is happening, that it is not working, that he has miscalculated, and he reaches back out. In that moment, he collapses the exact process I have been describing. The internal audit she was running, the space that was just beginning to produce real self-knowledge about how she feels, closes. She no longer has to locate her feelings about him because he has returned to fill the space before she finished looking. Remember what I told you at the start, that her silence is not empty, that something is moving through it that you cannot see from the outside? What I am describing now is how most men exit that process at precisely the moment it was beginning to produce something worth waiting for. The sequence requires time, not indefinite time, but enough time for her to complete the audit, find what is there, and do something with what she finds. Interrupting it is the most common mistake in this entire dynamic, and almost no one tells men what they are actually interrupting when they do it. So let me show you exactly what she does with what she's feeling, because it is not nothing, and it is not what you would expect. She is not sitting with this feeling quietly. She is doing something with it, and if you know what to look for, the signs are more legible than you might think. When a woman has completed her internal audit and found that she cares more than she expected, when the silence has done what consistent pursuit was not doing, her behavior changes in specific, observable ways. Not dramatically, not in ways that announce themselves, but in ways that carry unmistakable pattern if you know the texture of what you are looking at. The first thing she does is reach out with something that costs her nothing if he does not respond warmly. A reaction to something he posted. A short message referencing something shared between them. An inside reference, a callback to a specific moment, offered in a tone that is light enough to retreat from cleanly if he receives it neutrally. She is testing the temperature of his silence before she commits any more of herself to the direction it might lead. This is not game playing. It is the same social self-protection I described earlier. She will not step onto ground she cannot see clearly. The second thing is subtler and happens before the first. She becomes more attentive to his peripheral presence. If you share a social environment, mutual friends, the same spaces, connected accounts online, she begins paying attention to what his life looks like from the outside. Not obsessively, but with a new quality of focus. She is gathering information about whether the person she found in her audit is the same person she would find if she looked at him now. The third behavior is the one that most men miss entirely because it doesn't come directly towards them. She makes herself slightly more visible in spaces where he might notice her, not aggressively but deliberately. She mentions to a mutual friend something positive about an interaction they had. She appears at a gathering she might previously have skipped. She positions herself in the overlap of their shared world and waits to see if he orients toward her. Of course, none of these behaviors in isolation confirms anything definitive. One message could be anything. One appearance somewhere could be coincidence. But the pattern of all three, low-risk contact, peripheral attention, and deliberate visibility within the same window of time is not coincidence. But before she lets herself fully move toward him, there is one thing she needs to know. And she finds out through a test she will never tell him she's running. Here is the part of this that almost never gets talked about. The moment right before she decides to let herself care again. She does not just arrive there, she checks first. Before a woman allows herself to fully re-engage with a man who has pulled back, she needs to answer one question. Was his silence real or was it a strategy? Was he genuinely living his life? Settled, whole, unaffected? Or was he monitoring her responses, counting the days, waiting anxiously for the silence to produce a result? She finds out through a small, carefully constructed contact. Not a grand gesture, something modest, the kind of message or moment that is easy for a man who was genuinely just living his life to receive with warmth and ease, and nearly impossible for a man who has been waiting and watching to receive without revealing that he was waiting and watching. It might be a short, unserious message that references something specific between them. It might be a comment offered in passing the next time they are in the same space, not weighted, not loaded, but present. What she is watching for is not what he says. It is the energy underneath what he says. Whether there is a quality of relief in his response, the slight brightness of someone whose waiting has finally been rewarded. Whether he leans toward the contact more than the moment warrants. Whether, in the first 2 seconds of his reply, the monitoring she suspected becomes briefly visible. The man who has genuinely been living his life responds to this contact the way he would respond to anything, with ease, with warmth, with genuine curiosity about her, rather than visible relief that she reached out. His answer does not carry the weight of someone who needed this. And that absence of need, that same quality she was looking for during his pursuit, is what she finds and what moves her. The man who was anxiously waiting almost always fails this test before he has finished his first sentence. Not because he says the wrong thing, because the relief leaks through in a way she can feel even in a text message. A responsiveness that is half a beat too eager, a warmth that is half a degree too warm, a quality of arrival that tells her he was not where she hoped he was. That is the moment most men have already lost before they know they were being read. And now that you can see the whole sequence from beginning to end, let me bring this back to where it matters most, which is what you actually do with it. What this entire video maps out is a sequence that unfolds entirely without you, inside her, in the quiet you created through a process she is not consciously directing. The gap where your pursuit used to be becomes a space where her real feelings about you either surface or don't, based almost entirely on the quality of presence you had while you were there. The overarching truth underneath all of this is one you can carry beyond this particular situation. A woman cannot find out how much she values your presence while you are constantly providing it. Withdrawal does not create longing out of nothing. It creates the conditions for her to discover what was already there. Your job during the time you were present was to be someone worth discovering. You have that map now. The sequence from silence to self-audit to behavioral signal to test. You can see the whole shape of it, which means the silence is no longer a void you are trying to read from the outside. It is a process you understand from the inside. You do not need to engineer any of this. You do not need to track days or monitor her activity or calibrate your response time. Awareness is the whole thing. Simply knowing what the silence is doing for her will change how you carry it, with the kind of genuine ease that, as it turns out, is exactly what she is looking for when she finally checks. Tell me in the comments, have you ever pulled back from a woman and noticed something shift in how she acted toward you, even something small? I read every single one. If this kind of real, specific insight into how female psychology actually works is what you want more of, subscribe. Because this channel exists to give you exactly that, one video at a time. And in the next video, I'm going to show you the specific way a woman tests a man who has pulled back, to find out whether his silence is real or a strategy. And how he responds in the first few seconds of that test determines everything that happens next.